Okay, my next D&D review is going to be on B11, King's Festival. It was a basic D&D product produced a bit later than the other basic modules in 1989 by Carl Sargent. Carl Sargent is actually decently known for producing many different Greyhawk adventures, along with a series of books for Warhammer Fantasy. Now, King's Festival only numbers about 32 pages, and the encounters included in the book include orcs, kobolds, bugbears, giant spiders, carrion crawlers, which are actually not small, ghouls, skeletons, zombies, and a Thule. Thule is actually a combination of ghoul, hobgoblin, and troll, and are very dangerous. Now, King's Festival is specifically designed for inexperienced dungeon masters and players, and is an ideal adventure for 4 or more first-level PCs. I would highly suggest having more than 4, and maybe somewhere near 6 to 8, maybe double up the amount of PCs each player controls. 6 pages of the module are actually dedicated to helping the DM run the games. There is a beginner's guide to Karamikos for the Dungeon Master, and then there are also 10 pages dedicated to the adventure itself. The original book, if you can get your hands on it, also has 8 pages you could pull out and give to your players for immersion. Now, the adventure begins with the PCs arriving at the town of Stalinford during the preparation of the King's Festival, which is supposed to be the next day. Now, the King's Festival is dedicated to a king in the history of Karamikos. Karamikos currently has no king in this timeline. However, it really has no impact to the adventure itself currently. If you're running it in like your own world, you could actually have it dedicated to a king or emperor or lord in the history of whatever world you've created. Now, the PCs actually arrive later in the day, and they end up at the local tavern known as the Hungry Halfling. There they'll be able to get some food, and the place actually doubles as the town's inn. Finally, when they drift off to sleep, they'll be awoken by sounds of shouting in the streets, and as they look out, they will observe that a part of the town is actually on fire. Now, after the PCs hurriedly put on all their armor and equipment and rush outside, they are informed by a townsman that the town priest cannot be found and 2 other townspeople lay dead. The man then pleads with the PCs to hunt them down, to rescue the priest and anyone else missing, and to kill the orcs off, otherwise they might be back and continue pillaging and murdering. As they deliberate, another man, older, walks up and says he will help you track the orcs down, and he's out for revenge since one of the dead townspeople is actually his own son. He will also mention that another group of adventurers and warriors had actually gone off to find the orcs, but they chose the wrong path. And true to his word, this individual actually leads you to the caves the orcs are at, which is about 3 to 4 hours from the town. Now, should the players decide to mill about and try and ask for some assistance from the townspeople will be able to provide some minor assistance, mainly in the fashion of tools and other equipment such as rope and grappling hooks and pitons. Interestingly enough, this adventure actually has 2 separate parts. One is pretty much mandatory. The players will not be able to get away from it unless they decide to ignore the orcs altogether. However, after they are done killing the orcs, they will be informed of another danger in the caves, which revolves mainly around the undead and an evil cleric. Now, once the players actually make entry into the caves, the first encounter they'll have is with 3 orc guards. They actually have a decent chance of surprising these guards. It's, I believe, a 1 through 4 on a d6 will actually cause the players to get surprise on them. Now, the players in Basic or BECMI / Rule Cyclopedia Edition do have a chance to try and negotiate with these orcs. However, it says specifically in the book that the orcs will not negotiate and will instead begin to attack at the first opportunity. Once they get past these orc guards, they'll come to a intersection. They can go right, left, or forward. Should they go right, they will actually end up in the storage area where there is a single lone kobold inside there that the players can fight, and once they hit him once, he will surrender to them. However, the chances of the kobold actually surviving a hit is very low. Should the players have decided to go straight forward after defeating the guards, they will walk up to the sort of like tavern area they got inside the caves, and inside will be 7 drunk orcs who actually have a negative to hit modifier due to their level of intoxication. Should they then head right from there, they'll come to another intersection, where if they head left, they will run into one of the orc lieutenants there who is currently trying to feed a halfling prisoner to his giant spider. However, should they head to the right, instead, they will end up in the barracks where they'll run into 4 regular orcs. Now, once they begin this encounter, 2 of the orcs will actually attempt to flank the party by using one of the doors the players did not come through. I will reiterate my point that the concept that 4 level 1 player characters could be able to defeat this amount of orcs easily is not really possible. This is actually pretty deadly. I mean, orcs aren't exactly pushovers, well, at least for low level characters, especially level 1. A bad hit can take anybody down. But all of this is supposed to be done within 1 day. Now, should the player characters actually elect to head to the left instead of going forward after defeating the original 3 guards, they have a choice of going toward the cave area, which actually has a giant ferret in it and a giant lizard. Should the player characters actually look closely, they will notice that one of these stalagmites is actually crusted over a skeleton, which if they dig and spend time to actually go through it, has a gold ring on them that's worth a decent amount of gold. Now, after they defeat the monsters inside this like sort of cave area, they can also end up fighting 3 orcs inside of another guard room. The next room happens to include a giant ferret trainer along with one of his giant ferrets, and a little bit further ahead they'll actually come to a wall that is actually a secret door. Player characters may not be able to find this secret door in the beginning, especially if they haven't explored the rest of the cave yet. It is suggested that the dungeon master maybe offer clues should they defeat the rest of the cave, stating that they have not found the cleric yet, so obviously there must be more orcs around. Now, should they go to the room to the left of this wall/secret door, they'll actually run into an orc and a bugbear currently having negotiations over an alliance between their 2 factions. The bugbear is not a normal bugbear. It actually has some magical equipment to make him a little bit of a harder fight, and the orc is also no chump. Now, eventually, once the players get through the secret door, the first encounter they'll have is they'll find an orc lieutenant who may be surprised by them with a bloody sword. His first chance, if he gets surprise on them, is to run and tell the chief about them. However, if they get surprise on him, they can actually convince the man, or the orc, to take them to the chief's throne room like he's seeking admission, and once they open the door, he will run away and give the player characters a decent chance of surprising the chief and all of his guards in that room. Now, should they inspect one of the rooms, room number 13, they'll find out why the orc lieutenant's sword was bloody, because there is a tortured dead orc hanging up on the wall that the orc lieutenant was torturing. They also have a chance of falling into a trap, which is a good opportunity for a new DM to learn how traps work. And in room 15, the throne room, the orc chief can be found along with an orc magic user, and at least 2 guards who have the same statistics as an orc lieutenant. Once again, if you're only fielding 4 PCs at this point, this is a very bad encounter. Now, should they defeat the orc chief and all of his bodyguards and the magic user, they'll be able to explore the rest of the room to include the prison cells where the cleric Ulrich is currently at, the room where the chief lived, which is actually full of treasure, and a room with orc females and children who will cower in fear once the player characters open the door. The player characters have the choice of either letting them run, which will award no XP, or they can kill them, which is a extremely chaotic act, but I leave it up to the DM if he wants to issue XP for this. Thankfully, in BECMI/Rules Cyclopedia, the amount of experience you get from killing a monster is not as high as the amount of experience you get from collecting treasure. Now, once they save Ulrich, the cleric, he will advise them that the orcs had found a deeper, more dangerous evil in the caves and had placed it behind the throne room, or they had built the throne room on top of it. He would request that the players end up dealing with this evil. However, he suggests that they should probably head back to town to heal up and get everything else fixed up before they head back. Now, once the player characters return to Stalinford, the PCs will be congratulated on the return. People will wave and greet at them. They'll point at them and tell them how great they are, and the town will actually treat them to a superb meal at the Hungry Halfling. The book specifically says you may award XP now if you wish. Players will appreciate this. The PCs can also buy equipment. Furthermore, they can also buy weapons and even armor. The main usefulness of this to the PCs is that plate mail can be bought for those who do not have it, except for elves. The smith is actually a dwarf, and he does not make plate mail in elven size. The next day, when the player characters awake, Ulrich the cleric will come to the PCs, and he is prepared to cast at least 2 Cure Light Wound spells for them. He requests that they return to the Orc's lair and investigate the deeper evil within. Now, this is an optional adventure. You don't have to do it. It's pretty much needed for it to be able to go to the next adventure, which is Queen's Harvest. If the PCs agree, Ulrich will give them magical help. He will give them a magical scroll of your choice, apparently. It doesn't exactly specifically say what it is. And a magical gem that has a special spell cast upon it, which is Continual Light. So pretty much it's a glowstone. This stone pretty much gives clear light in a 20-foot radius. Ulrich himself cannot come with the PCs, much to his regret, because he has to prepare for the festival. When the PCs finally get back to the cave, all surviving orcs will have fled, and the PCs can get to location number 19 without meeting any enemies. Onwards on to part 2 of this adventure. This part of the dungeon is unlit, except for locations 29, 30, and 31, which are lit with oil-burning lamps. Well, according to the book, it says that PCs may well wish to use hit-and-run tactics here, retiring to a nearby cave for rest and recovery after an encounter or 2. The monsters in this dungeon level are mostly unintelligent, and normal morale checks can be made unless the text says otherwise. The first room they'll go into is actually called the Red Worm-like Cavern. It's actually inhabited by at least 2 red worms who actually burrow through the ground. They're not exactly large creatures. The burrows are about the size a halfling could fit into. However, should a halfling in the party decide to go into one of the holes, they will be stuck fighting a 3rd red worm by himself or herself. Section 21 is actually going to be an old burial chamber, which is inhabited by a carrion crawler. 22 is inhabited by a ghoul. It specifically says that if player characters are not familiar with ghouls, don't refer to it as a ghoul. Let them figure out what it can do the hard way. 23 is inhabited by 5 skeletons, along with Section 24. 25 is actually some rubble that blocks the path, and should the players decide to dig through it, they will be attacked by 2 giant snakes. Section 26 is inhabited by an oil beetle, which will spray blistering oil onto PCs, which will actually harm them in the future with negative modifiers to their attacks. Section 27 is inhabited by the single Thule, which will be a nice surprise for players. Section 28 is actually a secret door. If your players don't find it, it's really up to you if you really want players to actually roll to find it. However, if you want them to defeat the evil cleric, just kind of hand wave it. Maybe not instantly when they go into the room, but after they defeat all the other monsters in this section of the dungeon, maybe say that there feels like there's another draft coming from room 22, and once they go in there, they find the secret door. Now, once they go down this long pathway, they'll come to section 29, which is inhabited by 2 zombie guards and a pit trap in the middle. The pit trap is specifically designed to kind of entrap any heavily armored players. Once they get through 29, they'll eventually reach section 30. 30 is where the evil cleric resides, and he is a level 3 cleric. Also in this room is sort of like an altar that the cleric currently has a body on. The body has actually been half stripped of its chainmail on it. After the player characters are able to defeat the evil cleric, they can search the body and they'll find a note. This is pretty much an introduction to the next adventure, Queen's Harvest. Also, they'll be able to go into room 31 and find a vast amount of treasure for the players, which will pretty much get them to level 2. Now, for rating this adventure, even though some points may get a bit of a negative, we got to keep in mind that this is an introductory adventure, literally designed for level 1 characters and DMs that have no experience. For the adventure itself, I'm going to rate it a 3. It's remarkably average in almost everything. For value, I'm going to rate this a 2. At the time of this recording, the DM's Guild does not have a print-on-demand version of this. However, you can get a PDF for only $5. However, if you want a print version of this, at this current time, it's going to cost you about $100 on eBay, which is absolutely ridiculous for this module. For deadliness factor, I'll also give this a 3. I mean, there's nothing too deadly in it. Everything inside this module is designed pretty much for players to be able to overcome. There's nothing with any specific like invulnerabilities to damage in this module. However, the amount of monsters that player characters could go into if they aren't careful can kill them. Well, I hope this review helps somebody out there. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.